the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck a number of key oil industry facilities in Russia. Specifically, a refinery in the Krasnodar region. We're talking about the Ilsky oil refinery. The press service of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces reported that, together with members of the resistance group Black Spark, they managed to destroy the main technological hub of the facility. Without it, the plant's operations have essentially come to a halt. As usual, the Russian authorities are pretending that nothing happened. But the scale of the damage caused by Ukraine's defense forces is better expressed in actions than in words. Fuel shortages in the Federation, rising prices, and mile-long lines at gas stations. But let's take it one step at a time. India is the second most important buyer of Russian oil. Even before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian army, supplies from Russia accounted for only a small percentage of India's imports. Now, according to various estimates, we're talking about a third, or even almost half, of the total volume. After losing the European market, the Kremlin frantically searched for new clients, and New Delhi turned out to be not a friend in need, but a pragmatic dealer who skillfully took advantage of its partner's desperate situation. Russia sells oil to India at low prices and occasionally agrees to new discounts, which allows India to make good money by refining the raw materials and even selling petroleum products. The Kremlin doesn't really have any alternatives. Putin is determined to continue the war against Ukraine at any cost, and the war machine is getting more and more voracious every year. The export of energy resources is Moscow's main source of income. Washington tried to cut it off. The United States imposed additional tariffs on Indian goods. And while at first Indian state companies were concerned about diversifying their supplies, later the government stated otherwise.
Whether it's Russian oil or anything else, we make decisions to buy where it best suits our needs, whether that's based on price, logistics, or anything else. So when we buy oil, especially such an expensive item, paid for in foreign currency, which accounts for so much of our highest import expenses, we have to make the decision that works best for us. So we will definitely keep buying.
Despite India's refusal to cut back on purchases and its continued support of the Russian war machine, Washington is confident that sooner or later, New Delhi will have to give in.
India still doesn't want to open up its market and doesn't want to stop buying Russian oil, right? And to stop being part of BRICS. They're caught between Russia and China. If that's who you want to be, then go ahead. But either support the dollar, support the US, support your biggest customer, which is the American consumer, or I think you'll be paying a 50% tariff, and we'll see how long that lasts.
Before the full-scale invasion, the main consumers of Russian oil were European countries. Now, China and India have taken their place, and in the EU, there are only two exceptions: Slovakia and Hungary. These countries continue to receive Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline and consistently express outrage whenever Ukraine strikes it, treating it as a legitimate military target directly linked to funding the Russian military-industrial complex. Recently, Budapest and Bratislava sharply criticized, not the aggressor Moscow, but Kiev. At a joint press conference with the Prime Minister of Slovakia, the President of Ukraine stated that the Ukrainian armed forces are responding to the aggressor's strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, and will continue to do so. Moreover, Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that if Slovakia is ready to give up Russian oil, Ukraine is prepared to help it maintain energy stability.
We are ready to have joint energy projects. We are ready to supply oil and gas to Slovakia. And I told the Prime Minister about this if it is not Russian gas or Russian oil, because we are at war. Period.
In parallel with the sanctions pressure on Russia and its trading partners, Kiev has launched its own track of countermeasures. We are talking about systematic strikes on Russian oil refining facilities. At first, these were isolated operations, but now attacks on refineries have become regular. In August 2025 alone, the 14th Separate Unmanned Aviation Regiment of the Ukrainian Armed Forces struck Russian oil industry facilities 11 times.
Deep strikes. The regiment's actions have led to a sharp reduction in oil refining capacity, disruption of established supply chains for petroleum products, and fuel shortages across Russia. This has already negatively affected the enemy's ability to effectively supply logistics for occupation forces, conduct rotations, and quickly maneuver large units. From a message on the Telegram channel of the UAV forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Among the latest strikes on Russian oil infrastructure are the linear production dispatch station in the Bryansk region and the oil refinery in the Krasnodar territory. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine emphasizes that such operations strike at the most important offensive potential of the Russian army.
The 8N linear production dispatch station is part of the Steel Horse main oil pipeline complex, which has a pumping capacity of 10.5 million tons. This facility is of strategic importance for ensuring the transportation of petroleum products for the Russian occupation army. Units of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also carried out a strike on the facilities of the Ilsky oil refinery in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. This oil refinery processes 6,420,000 tons of oil annually and is involved in supplying the Russian armed forces. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook.
Notably, the strike on the Ilsky oil refinery came not only from the air, but also from the ground. The operation was planned together with the local resistance group Black Spuk. As a result, the Yellow at 6 was destroyed, the main facility, without which the refinery is essentially paralyzed. This is a primary processing unit with a capacity of up to 6 million tons of crude oil per year.
This unit carries out the dehydration and desalting of crude oil, and then its distillation into fractions to produce various petroleum products such as gasoline and diesel fuel. The enemy will inevitably continue to suffer losses for its aggression, and we are preparing new unconventional surprises. From a statement by the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
As a result of Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, Russia has already lost at least 17% of its refining capacity, according to Reuters. In terms of scale, these losses are equivalent to more than 1 million barrels of oil per day. Sanctions imposed by Kiev's partners are also making the situation worse for the Kremlin. Following the EU, Norway has announced a reduction in the price cap on Russian oil from $60 to $47.50 per barrel.
Oil exports still make up a third of the Russian government's revenue. Reduced profits and increased pressure on the Russian economy are making it harder for the Russian authorities to wage their illegal war against Ukraine. For Norway, it is important to join forces with our allies in measures that can help achieve this. This change brings the oil price closer to the cost of production and reduces Russia's income from oil exports. These revenues are used in the Russian military economy and, as a result, contribute to increasing the threat to Ukraine and the rest of Europe. Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, on the ministry's website.
And here's what we have as a result. The sanctions noose continues to tighten. In Brussels, they are already preparing the 19th package, and they're coordinating it directly with Washington. Europe and the US are hitting oil through restrictions. Ukraine is methodically putting Russian oil refineries and pipelines out of commission with its drones, sending them off for costly repairs. Pressure is coming from all directions, and each one is painful for the Kremlin. And Russia itself is driving itself deeper and deeper into a dead end. Having lost its main market in Europe, it is now forced to sell oil and gas for next to nothing, essentially turning itself into a raw materials colony. And even that doesn't guarantee that tomorrow they won't turn their backs on her. After all, the market can offer Putin's friends both new challenges and new opportunities.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.